Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Grant Park by Leonard Pitts, Jr. Narrated by Ron Butler. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., April 3rd, 1968. But what we know, what we have seen, is that America can change. Senator Barack Obama, March 18th, 2008. 1. Martin Luther King stood at the railing facing west. The moon was a pale crescent just rising in early twilight to share the sky with a waning sun. He leaned over, joking with the men in the parking lot below. A couple of them were wrestling playfully with James Orange, a good-natured man with a build like a brick wall. "Now you be careful with preachers half your size," King teased him. "Dr. King," called Orange in a plaintive voice, "it's two of them and one of me. You should be asking them not to hurt me." "Doc," someone called out from below, "this is Ben Branch. You remember Ben?" "Oh, yes," said King. "He's my man. How are you, Ben?" Another voice yelled up from below, "Glad to see you, Doc." As Malcolm Toussaint moved toward King, it struck him that the preacher seemed somehow lighter than he had the last time Malcolm had seen him. It had been late one night, a week before, by the dumpsters out back of the Holiday Inn. The man Malcolm met that night had seemed weighted, so much so that even Malcolm had found himself concerned and moved. Malcolm, who had long scorned the great Reverend Doctor, who had, in the fashion of other young men, hip, impatient, and cruel, mocked him as the Lord. But that was before Malcolm had met the man. That was before they had talked. Now he moved toward King, his mind roiling with the decision that had sprung from that moment, the news he had come to share. King, he knew, would be pleased. There would be a smile, perhaps a heavy hand clamping on Malcolm's shoulder. "Good for you, Brother Malcolm," he would say. "Good for you." Malcolm was vaguely amused to find himself here on this balcony, anticipating this man's approval. If you had told him just a few days ago that he would be here, ready to go back to school, ready to embrace nonviolent protest, he would have laughed. But that, too, was before. Malcolm meant to raise his hand just then, to catch King's attention, but a movement caught his eye. Just a reflected ray of the dying sun, really, glinting off something in a window across the street. Something that, he knew this instinctively, should not have been there. He wondered distractedly what it was. King's voice drew him back. "I want you to sing it like you've never sung it before," he was calling to someone in the parking lot below. "Sing it real pretty." And Malcolm realized he had missed something, because he had no idea what they were talking about. His attention had been distracted by... what was that? "It's getting chilly." Yet another voice calling to King from below. "I think you'll need a top coat." "Okay, Jonesy," King was saying. "You really know how to take good care of me." And here, the moment breaks. Time fracturing, as time sometimes will, into its component parts, until an event is no longer composed of things happening in a sequence, but somehow all happens at once. And you can see and touch and live all the smaller moments inside the right now. This is how it is for Malcolm Toussaint now. King is laughing. Malcolm is taking a step toward him. King is straightening. Laughter is echoing from below. King is reaching into a pocket for his cigarettes. He is becoming aware of Malcolm on his left. His head is coming around. There are the bare beginnings of a welcoming smile. And Malcolm knows, suddenly knows, and Malcolm is leaping across space, across time itself, becoming airborne. He was sure of it. That detail felt right. Even though by this time King is barely 6 feet away. Malcolm grabbing two hands full of expensive silk. Yanking Martin Luther King off balance. Yanking him down hard in the same instant they all hear the popping sound like a firecracker. In the same instant he feels the soft-nosed .30-06 bullet whistle past his cheek like a phantom breath. In the same instant, he falls awkwardly across King's chest. And then And then time seems to reel for a crazy, breathless moment, as if deciding what to do now. The fulcrum of history teetering, the future hanging, suspended in midair. Until all at once, with a brutal force, time decides itself and slams back into gear. A woman shrieked. Someone yelled, "Somebody is shooting!" Someone yelled, "Doc, are you okay?" Someone yelled, "Stay down!" Malcolm's breath was ragged in his own ears. His heart hammered like drums. Then, from beneath him, he heard a familiar baritone voice say calmly, very calmly, but yet with a touch of breathless wonder, "Oh my God, was that a gunshot?" Their eyes met. Malcolm didn't speak, couldn't speak. "Brother Malcolm," said Martin Luther King, his voice still suffused with wonder and yet also an almost unnatural calm, "I think you just saved my life." Malcolm was overwhelmed by the there-ness of the man. He was not myth and mist and history. He was not a poster board image on a wall behind a child dutifully reciting in a child's thin, sweet tenor, "I have a dream today." No, he was there, beneath 20-year-old Malcolm Toussaint, who had fallen crosswise on top of him. Malcolm could feel the weight and heft of him, the fall and rise of his chest. He could see his very pores, could smell the tobacco on his breath, the Aramis on his collar. Martin Luther King was there, still alive, beneath him. Malcolm opened his mouth to speak, and then he awoke. 2. He did not scream. He did not sit bolt upright, panting and shivering in the pre-dawn chill. The dream was an old one, had haunted his sleep off and on for 40 years, and had long since lost the power to shake him. No, by now it was almost an old friend, dropping by every now and again to remind him of the singular failure of his life, that fateful instant when he had seen, but did not react in time, did not understand in time, froze. Sometimes, as tonight, the dream gave him a do-over, allowed him to react in time, let him make it right. More often, the dream unfolded precisely as that awful moment had unfolded, less a true dream than just a memory relived while sleeping. Malcolm failing to act, failing to understand what he saw, failing to realize what was about to happen until the very instant it did. Failing. The shot coming. The bullet driving Martin Luther King down as a hammer drives a nail. The gore spattering. Malcolm Toussaint standing there, not 6 feet away, impotent, staring. Enough. He pushed the covers away, sat on the edge of the bed, the hardwood floor cool beneath his feet. No more time to dwell on the thing he had failed to do back when Lyndon Johnson was president and the space race was in full swing. It was time to face today, and today he was going to be fired. It was even possible he was going to be arrested. He supposed there might be some statute that criminalized what he had done. He didn't think prosecution was likely. Surely they'd leave him some tattered shred of his previous dignity, though he could not dismiss the possibility out of hand. But at the very least, yes, he would be fired. And he would deserve firing as much as any of the serial plagiarists and fiction writers he had railed against so loudly. The fucking liars who had so spectacularly besmirched a noble profession, his noble profession, in the last 20 years. Now he was one of them. He was journalism's latest scandal. A storied career, from a hovel on the south side of Memphis to this place in Chicago. 2 Pulitzer Prizes, countless lesser awards lining the walls of his office, would end in ruin today. No more twice-weekly nationally syndicated column. No more New York Times bestsellers blurbed by Oprah Winfrey and Bill Clinton. No more daily radio talk show. No more regular appearances on the Sunday morning political programs. No more. Nor would anyone speak in his defense. The National Association of Black Journalists, which had given him a Lifetime Achievement Award just 4 years ago, would maintain an embarrassed silence. The NAACP would look the other way. He would be a pariah. And the worst part is, he would deserve it. Inevitably, someone would ask why he did it. And what could he say? He could tell them the truth, but they would never understand it. He regretted what he had done, yes, but he was not sorry. Even now, having slept fitfully on it, he was not sorry. Did that make sense? Would they get the distinction? I just got tired, he would say. And they would ask him, not understanding, tired of what? But someone in the mob, he imagined, black like him, journalist like him, up in years like him, would not need to ask, would only close his notebook and shake his head, would understand, if not condone, and would, maybe, enough. Malcolm got out of bed and padded toward a marble bathroom not much smaller than the house he had grown up in. It was just a little after 4 a.m. If he hurried, he could get into the building, pack up his office, the mementos of a 36-year career, and be gone before anyone got there. The alternative made him shudder. The alternative was to go in there, endure the humiliation of their questions and their anger, and be required to wait outside his office while security, loss prevention, they called it now, threw his things in a box and then escorted him out under the stunned and disappointed gaze of people he had worked with, laughed with, fought with, mentored. He showered quickly in the walk-in stall, where needles of water hit you from 5 directions at once. Moments later, he used his towel to wipe clean a circle of mirror and began to shave the face of the old man who stared back at him. Old man. It was always something of a shock to apply those words to himself, but the evidence of the mirror could not be denied. His eyes were tired and sad, nested in twin hollows of wrinkles and crinkles. His brown skin seemed papery and thin. The short black afro he had worn that awful day on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel had shrunk down to a defeated gray frizz, thinning on the top. Malcolm was 60. He looked 70. He felt 80. Arthritis had stiffened his joints. His blood pressure was a problem. His eyesight was going to hell. His feet hurt. Worst of all, there was the fatigue, an abiding exhaustion, not so much of body, he felt, as of mind, of spirit. Living had become an act of penance. He was tired. Indeed, he had been so tired for so long that he could barely remember being anything else. The happy young man who had approached Martin Luther King in the last instant of the great man's life seemed a stranger. No, a lie. A memory of someone who never was. Malcolm shaved. He dressed quickly. Long johns, blue jeans, long-sleeved blue shirt with the logo of the Chicago Post above the breast pocket, a fur-lined waist-length jacket, a bull's cap on his head. No need for one of the natty ties and sport coats that always made his slovenly young colleagues roll their eyes and laugh behind their hands. That was the uniform of a man working in an office, something he no longer was. He walked slowly, down the hall and down the gently winding staircase, past the African-American folk art, mostly paintings and a few small sculptures, that had been Marie's passion until she died of breast cancer. It had always made him feel a bit like he was living in a museum, all that fancy art covering the walls and tables. But Marie was 2 years dead, and he hadn't yet taken it down. Doing that, he supposed, would be like admitting that she actually was gone. That it wasn't a mistake, an oversight, something for which he could demand a recount. That was something he was not yet prepared to do. In the living room, he pulled on his gloves, images of his son and daughter and their spouses and children watching him from the mantel. Both were married, raising their families in California. He usually saw them at Thanksgiving, when they inevitably started the argument that was becoming all too familiar since his wife's death. The one about how he should retire, sell the house, and join them on the West Coast. With Mom gone, did he really need the big house? At his age, did he really need the Chicago winters? At his age. As if, having reached 60, there was nothing left for him to do except wait for death. And the hell of it was, since Marie left him, there were days he found he couldn't think of anything better to do. Enough. Enough, enough, enough. His car was parked at the bottom of the stairs in the driveway that circled the front of the house, looping around a fountain, off for the winter, like a donut around a hole. Malcolm drove a red Corvette. It was hard on his knees, and a four-wheeled cliché for a man of his age, but he couldn't help himself. He loved that car. He lowered himself into it now, wincing a bit as Uncle Arthur, his mother's name for arthritis once upon a time, took a hammer to his bones. As always, he was compensated for his suffering when the car started with a deep, satisfying roar, and he eased it around the circle, down the drive, and to the street. At the mailbox, he stopped and lowered his window to pluck out the day's paper. Malcolm folded the paper open and turned on the interior light. "Day of Reckoning," read the headline, above photos of John McCain and Barack Obama giving speeches. Election Day. With all that he was dealing with, he had almost forgotten. Almost. He wanted to go and vote this morning, when the polls opened, but he wondered if his presence, everyone in town knew his face, after all, might cause too much of a distraction, especially today. What an irony, he thought, if what he'd done forced him to miss the most historic election of his lifetime. He flipped the paper over, and there it was. His SIG picture and the column that Bob Carson, his editor, had rejected. The one he'd said was too furious, too incendiary, unworthy of him, and destined to be published in the Chicago Post only after Sarah Palin wed Jeremiah Wright on a nude beach in Jamaica. "I'm doing you a favor," Bob had said. "Go home, get some rest, we'll talk about it tomorrow." He had never had a column rejected before. Granted, he'd never written anything like this before, but still. Malcolm had cursed Bob and threatened to quit, taking with him all the prestige his byline brought to this third-rate paper in a time when even first-rate papers were cutting staff, cutting sections, cutting news holes, and looking to the future as one stares down the barrel of a gun. But Bob had stood firm. "Go home," he had repeated. "Get some rest." Malcolm had stormed out. He had taken his case to the managing editor, to the editor, to the publisher. Each had read the column, this column, that now sat below the fold on the front page. Each had paled visibly by the time they reached the end, even Lydia Barnett, the publisher. She had looked up at him, this stylish sister of about 40 years, of whom he had always secretly said in his heart, "Man, if I was just 20 years younger." And he knew he was doomed from the moment she began to speak in that honeyed voice one uses to instruct children and the feeble-minded. "Malcolm, you know we can't publish this. Why did you even bring this to me? You think I'm going to interfere with an editorial decision?" "I think you should, in this case at least." "Well, I'm sorry, Malcolm, but I'm not." "Lydia, I know it's on the line, but—" "On the line?" Her dark eyes had flashed like the warning lights at a railroad crossing. "Malcolm, this isn't on the line. This is so far over the line you can't even see the line from here. You'd have to board a plane to get back to the line." "Come on, Lydia," he said. "I wouldn't expect them to understand." He cocked his head to indicate the white editors, the whole white world beyond the walls of her office. "But you should get where I'm coming from." Now thunderclouds rolled into those eyes, and he knew he had gone too far. "Do not," she said, "play blacker than thou with me, Malcolm Toussaint. You know better. There is no form of condescension, paternalism, sexism, or racism that I don't know firsthand. I had to climb over all of that to get to sit in this chair. And the one good thing about it is after all of that, I don't have to prove who I am to you or anybody else." "Lydia, I didn't mean it like that. I'm just saying—" "I know what you meant, Malcolm. You should go home. Take a few days off. When's the last time you had a vacation?" "Maybe I could rewrite it, soften it a little." "No, this piece will not run in my paper. Go home." He had left, but he had not gone home. Instead, he had gone to a bar he knew on the south side, where he had spent the afternoon staring morosely into one beer after another. And there, he had hatched a plan. When he returned to the post offices in the big building on Michigan Avenue, it was late. very late. Copy editors were pulling on their heavy coats, the police reporter shutting down the scanners, the janitor pushing a big trash can between the mostly empty desks. The newsroom was quiet. The daily miracle had been accomplished once again. He had slipped past them into Bob's empty office, closed the blinds against the leakage of light, and fired up Bob's computer. 7 months ago, Bob had given him his password, with its administrative access to the Post's systems, to fix some glitch in a column Bob didn't have time to get to. And sure enough, Bob had not changed his password in all those months. Malcolm typed it in. Bob_Dylan #1. And Bob's desktop flashed into view. Malcolm's original plan had been to pluck the banned column from the deleted items basket and put it in its customary spot on the editorial page, back of the Cityside section. But sitting there at Bob's desk, signed on under Bob's name, he had a better idea. Or at least a bolder one. It was the kind of idea you get when you've had a few, and some voice in your mind says, "In for a penny, in for a pound." And you nod to yourself because that seems, under the circumstances, sage advice. So he had called up the front page, which had already been transmitted to the press room. If the press room chief was ready to roll the presses and saw that Bob, Malcolm actually, had the file open and called upstairs to find out what was going on, Malcolm knew he would be well and truly screwed, so he had to work fast, and he did. With a few deft keystrokes and clicks, Malcolm stripped a story off the bottom of the front page, some wire piece about voters who were still undecided on the eve of the election, and dropped his forbidden column in its place. And then, even though time was critical, even though the press room would be looking for this page any second, he paused. There was a moment of absolute clarity, when he knew what he was about to do, and what would happen, and what it would cost him, and that doing it was absolutely insane. A moment. And then he pressed send. Now, 5 hours later, on not quite 4 hours of restless sleep, he sat in his car and regarded the end result. He had thought he might feel some rough sense of satisfaction, even vindication, at getting the column in the paper. He was disappointed to realize that all he felt was the same fatigue that had walked with him like a shadow for so long now. The sense that he had spent his entire life like a tire spinning in snow, kicking up a great fantail, making a lot of noise, and getting absolutely nowhere. He felt hollow, empty as the wind that moved the skeletal branches of the trees outside. Malcolm tossed the paper onto the passenger seat and stomped the gas. The car leapt forward into the darkened street. He had the city to himself for another hour or so. Nobody on the streets, few cars on the road. A police car going the other way, an old white van with rust patches on the hood following behind him. A battered old Toyota parked at a gas pump. A tired-looking woman in a waitress uniform slumped against it. Was it really so long ago they had thought they would change the world? People? Kids like him? Young men and women with big afros and Jew-fros and long blonde locks and strident voices singing songs of peace and love and revolution. A whole generation of them, fresh and raw, untainted by the failures and compromises of their parents' generation, utterly convinced that they were something this world had never seen, a new people thinking new thoughts that had never been thought before. Was it really 40 years since they had raised fists and chanted, "Power to the people," and "Give peace a chance," and "Off the establishment," and "Revolution"? 40 years. And look what had become of them. Look what had become of him. Old and tired, and driving a trophy car away from a trophy house and socking away money into a 401k. They had been so smug about their power to change the world. Malcolm heaved a sigh. He thought of turning on the radio, filling the small space with jazz or Motown, or even the ceaseless drone of the news. He left it off. The silence fit his mood. He got on the expressway. Chicago flew by. Moments later, He pulled up to the entrance of the parking structure beneath the post building. He swiped his ID card, and when the gate lifted, he was mildly relieved. It had occurred to him they might already have disabled his access to the building. The nightman on the security desk gave him a curious look, but only nodded as Malcolm swiped his ID card again and went through the turnstiles. Riding up on the elevator, he wondered idly what that look had been about. Maybe the guard had seen the paper already and knew that Malcolm was dead meat walking. Maybe the man just wondered what anybody was doing here at this unholy hour of the morning. The newsroom was quiet as a cemetery, and Malcolm felt not unlike a ghost as he wandered through. He was tempted to linger, to look around, to press the memory of this place into his mind like an image in a scrapbook. Did anyone use scrapbooks anymore? After all, the newsroom of the Chicago Post had been his home away from home for more than half his life, and he knew he would never be here, never be allowed here again. But there was, he knew, no time for that. So he retrieved 2 empty boxes from the mailroom, let himself into his office, and went briskly, methodically, to work. He took the photos first. There was Marie's high school picture, showing a stunning teenage girl with blue eyeshadow, a reddish afro, and a soft smile. There was Jimmy Carter, jabbing a finger at Malcolm at some contentious point in their interview. There was a family photo with the kids at his son Miles's college graduation. There was Malcolm shaking hands with Bill Clinton at some award ceremony. There was the signed photo of Michael Jordan towering over Malcolm, draping an arm upon his shoulder. With each photo, Malcolm had to remind himself not to stop and look, not to lose himself in the memories the images contained. He looked at his awards, the statues and wall plaques trumpeting this triumph or that. Here was an NAACP Image Award for one of his books. Here were the citations for his Pulitzers. Here were prizes from the National Association of Black Journalists, the Press Club of Atlantic City, the American Society of Newspaper Editors, the Society of Professional Journalists, honorary doctorates from a half-dozen universities. 2 boxes would not do it, he realized distractedly. He would have to go back to the mailroom and get more. In a minute. First, he went through his paper files, then threw his Rolodex and his notebooks into a box. He did not worry about computer files. Though he had learned to use them, Malcolm did not especially trust computers. He understood the technology well enough intellectually, but still, the whole idea of storing information digitally, keeping it in some form that you could not touch and thus assure yourself it was there, struck him as a leap of faith, one he could not bring himself to make. You had to take the machine's word that it had your stuff, that it would not inexplicably take a mood and banish your hard work to non-existence. That was why he saved a hard copy of everything he did. When they heard this, people always called him old-fashioned. But he had been vindicated more than once by the agonized, inconsolable moaning of some colleague whose irreplaceable data had been lost to hard drive failures. But it wasn't just the reliability of computers he distrusted. It was the way they had changed everything. You couldn't talk to a person on the telephone anymore. You had to talk to a machine. You had to use a machine to pay a bill, buy a concert ticket, write a letter. And everything was wired up these days, interconnected. Suddenly, it was no longer enough to be the best journalist you could be, to do the work and put it out there and let it speak for itself. Suddenly, you were supposed to keep a Facebook page and answer emails and moderate discussions on your message board. Malcolm had stopped saying these things aloud. He knew how they made him sound. He was conscious of the world moving faster, receding from him, as if he were a sprinter grown winded. The worst part was, he didn't care. A sigh. Despite reminding himself to hurry, despite knowing he did not have time to linger over photos, he lifted the picture of Marie out of the box, stared into the eyes he had loved for so many years. That lush smile, a teenaged girl facing the rising sun of an unknown future with a kind of confidence that comes only when you're too young to know any better. It was, he had always told her, the best picture she had ever taken. What would she think of what he had done? And all at once, This idea of slipping in to pack up his office.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?